what I noticed about you is you do a good job of taking pop culture and bringing it into the traditional news space. And so just talk to me
Mhm.
about that experience.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. I think it's almost out of necessity. It's a way to be able to cover the stories that you want to be able to cover. I think one of the first bigger stories kind of in the space that you're talking about with regards to pop culture was Lil Nas X back in 2019 when he came out with the Old Town Road. And that was one of those things I was like probably 24, 25 years old. And I was sitting on Twitter and you see a song like that and you're like, man, and you see the fact that it's not charting on country radio or something like that, and you're like, this is crazy. This is a story. And so I think, first of all, from Nightline's perspective, I think they saw that, okay, there's a need for a younger reporter to be able to translate these kinds of topics, like TikTok, and sort of the ever-changing social media landscape. And I was able to do that. A lot of time has kind of passed since then. So the stories and the nature of the stories have changed a bit, but I think Nightline was a little bit ahead of the curve in realizing that, look, like what the news provides already is a necessity, but in order to be able to attract that younger audience and kind of keep up with the times, um, need to be able to sort of report kind of on those topics, on those issues, especially as this next generation of stars and change makers and athletes that their careers are being made on platforms like TikToks, right? So it was kind of out of necessity. It was kind of out of necessity, and for me, being not I don't know if I'm young anymore. I'm 30 now, but starting out doing this when I was like 24, 25, it was a cool way to be able to bring my stories or what my generation was talking about to the mainstream, I guess, right?
And a quick sidebar, I'm going to keep on with Nightline for a second, but what do your friends think of this when they see you talking about things that you guys are talking about on TV?
I think it's always appreciated when we can talk about things that are going on in the zeitgeist. And I think Nightline in particular, not me, but Nightline in particular, does such a good job at that. And kind of being ahead of the curve. We've had that new show, Impact by Nightline, which is on Hulu, and they're on the nose, man. They're on the nose. I think they just had an episode drop today about Kate Middleton and sort of the Photoshop controversy. And so I think Nightline is such a space that's been ahead of the curve, as far as being willing to kind of broach these topics as serious news stories. We're competing with stories that are going viral, sort of the or series that are going viral, fiction, nonfiction, scripted, unscripted. So the playing field has become a lot more competitive in the sense that you're not just competing to have the story first, you're competing to have a story that's good enough that can get somebody to switch from whatever show they're watching to watch, right?
And I was just going to mention Impact by Nightline. I had just recently watched the one about Beyonce's new country album, which was a
Yes.
full length, in depth report. And I think
Mhm.
that's interesting that that's able to be done because some news organizations, they went this route and haven't had success, but Nightline somehow has had tons of success with it. And people are really taking to it because I could have watched anything on Hulu, but I was watching the news, but I may not have
For
felt like I
sure.
was watching the news.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, especially as we're seeing sort of news transition into sort of the streaming space, is sticking to your guns, committing to what works. And I think right now, and this is industry wide, because it is such an interesting time, you're seeing everybody kind of throw one line in kind of and give up quickly on it. You know what I'm saying? Hey, that didn't work this week. Let's not go back and do it again, you know? And what Impact has done a really good job is both being malleable and say, okay, this is what's doing really well. Let's do more of that. But at the same time, saying, hey, this is the type of stories that we're going to do to make this show, and this is what's going to get people talking. And that's what's important to us is to be a show that can keep people talking.
And what I love about talking to people in the industry is the fact that you can also get the behind the scenes perspective. And so, kind of talk about just the work that goes into producing some of these specials and reports about all the things people are talking about these days.
Oh man, I feel like I got the easy job when you compare it to what the producers and editors and shooters at Nightline are doing. They're some of the most talented people, if not the most talented people in the business, because they're doing everything from ideating these pitches to booking them to going out in the field, shooting them, coordinating all the insane logistics that go into just a single shoot that is a small part of a bigger story. And you're working with these crews that are incredibly talented. They come back, they bring the material back to New York. They'll formulate a script. We'll work together to kind of put a script together, and then it goes into edit. And it's not like your classic news package that is like 2 to 3 minutes where these guys are crashing it in a matter of hours. These guys have a matter of hours to crash 7 to 10 minute news packages for the broadcast, and they've got a matter of days to crash 30-minute packages for impact. So it is incredible to see how diverse and versatile our staff is from both their skill sets and their backgrounds. And I think it's unbelievable to know that we keep doing it every night. OJ Simpson, I think, his passing had been announced at like 10:45 this morning. Nightline will be crashing a full show on it tonight. That'll be airing by 12:30. And that'll be a full 25 set at 17, 18-minute broadcast. So it's unbelievable, really, what that show does night in and night out.
And not to downplay some of the work that social media creators make, but this is
Mm-hmm.
definitely a lot more attention to detail, because we also have to keep in mind that the audience is larger, and then you also have to make it digestible for so many Americans.
Most definitely, and it's important not to downplay, I think, what creators are doing in the social media space, because we are trying to achieve a lot of that success that creators are having in the social media space. And I just think that where quantity feeds the algorithm for a lot of those spaces that those guys are trying to take up in, you just got to be pumping out video after video after video after video. Nightline, it's 1 to 2 stories every night, and it's like you have to do it with a news value. I mean, I'm not putting this in the right words, but I think it's when you're looking at it from a social media perspective, what those guys have to do is completely different from what is demanded of newsrooms. And I think a night in and night out, night in and night out broadcast is no small feat. And then when you add on a full streaming show to it, man, it's Nightline producers are superheroes, man. It's unbelievable what they're capable of doing.
I would have to agree. And on top of that, what's interesting is seeing the fact that younger audiences also are sitting down and watching these full-length shows, streaming them. And you yourself, you've had to interview so many cool people, and I'm sure that's just a great experience overall. But to know that the audience is also younger too, does that surprise anyone that the audience has gotten to be so young for Nightline?
I think we always hope it is. I don't really know the numbers, so I got to be honest. If you have them, please do tell me. But I think the hope is that we can definitely attract that next generation to the news cycle, because I think it's important to carry them. Before they know it, they're going to be the ones running the show. So it's very cool to know that the younger generation is watching. I think we go in hoping like, hey man, we wonder if what we make is still in front of that next generation, because of how many competing factors are out there with the TikToks, the YouTubes, the Instagram Reels. So it's a competitive market, and so I think we just try to go in and focus on the story. We're not, and we try to make it as digestible for the everyday viewer. You know what it is, and a young, old, no matter what you look like or where you come from, in a way that it feels like, hey, we're sitting across the table and we can explain this to you like over a meal. And we hope that Nightline should feel no different.
Is it ever a challenge to address difficult topics, though, in the social media world? Because you definitely are getting more exposure to a lot more feedback.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're hyper aware of it. I think our generation, my generation, has grown up with it. So you kind of are always kind of thinking about it. You think 3 or 4 times about that caption. You know what I'm saying? It's just like you're very careful about the way you word things. But I think that just comes as a natural skill to reporting, right? Like your words need to be trusted every day, and so it's just making sure that translates on social media too. Obviously, you get the trolls in any sort of story that you do. but the same way we grew up with it. So it's something that you get used to, and you look at them and you look at those comments and you're like, wow, they really didn't watch the story at all. They totally missed the point, and that's gonna happen. But anything you take that as its own feedback and say, hey, could I have made this more digestible? Was this a little bit convoluted for the viewer to understand? And they took away a very binary perspective. I think my goal with any of the stories that I do is for people to walk away and say, huh, more complicated than I thought. I don't need to have an opinion, but I do need to be able to. I do want the viewer to be able to feel like, hey, okay, I need to not rush to judgment so quickly. You know what I'm saying? And that's with whatever the topic may be, whether that's talking about social media influencers, something that's trending, or like actual like breaking news or policy changes that are coming to our country and affecting the way people live.
And how I can tell you've really been in the business, you understand that most of the comments come from people that didn't watch it all the way through. So that's very valid. I can understand. So kind of just,
Totally,
yeah, about the future of this, because
for
it's not going
sure.
away. Social media is here to stay, and that's obviously going to be an impact on the future of Nightline. And so what do you think this next gen Nightline is going to look like?
It's tough. It's tough. I think this is the first time sort of in the business we've kind of for the past 10 years we've been saying, okay, streaming, 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 streaming. We're here. It's undeniable. This is where it is. This is the space that it's in. Um, I think as you're seeing a lot of these platforms kind of shake out with mergers and whatnot and how that ends up playing out, I'm curious to see it myself. And I think right now we're all kind of holding our breath to see what news is going to look like because the amount of change that has just happened in the past couple of years since the pandemic has been insane. It's been insane. Um, I think streaming is undeniable. It's how we marry. And right now, news is doing all these things, right? It's doing vertical video, it's doing social media, it's doing these streaming platforms where they're putting forth these specials, and it's doing traditional broadcasts. I think it's how the networks kind of get them to marry to one another and how there's sort of cohesion between all of them so that it feels like they're all sort of working towards a bigger kind of goal. So I think that's the immediacy of it. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I think that's really sort of getting some sort of cohesion between all those different kind of mediums, whether that be vertical video, social media, streaming platform, or traditional broadcast and sort of the digital print side of things, kind of figuring out how those can all kind of work together more seamlessly. Because I think right now, and this is with any network, cable news network, all of their departments are in sort of separate kind of areas, right? And so I think it's more getting them on one page. And I think ABC has done a fantastic job at that. Our president Kim Godwin has had the mantra of one ABC News, and just to see that level of cohesion sort of starting to take full the past few years has been very cool to watch. And I think it's also made the network look a lot smarter as far as our coverage because it's kind of seamless in a way. As far as the longer term future, it's tough, man. It's tough, especially as you see the news kind of leaning into streaming more and seeing sort of those mediums compete with more and more not news related content, right? Literally shows that are going viral or um reality TV or your favorite murder mystery. Like news is competing with that right now. And so how that will affect what the news actually looks like, I think really remains to be seen. And I'm anxious. I'm totally anxious because I think for the first time it hasn't seemed so obvious. And I think everyone kind of feels that way. Um, where everyone has been kind of beating ourselves over the head with this idea of streaming. We're here now. How do we take it to the next level, right? And get ahead of the game and be ready for that next change because we don't know what's coming.
And anyone in the news business will tell you we're always just, clawing our nails off with what's going on in the business. And so that's
Totally,
constant.
totally.
But there are those moments, though, being in this field that serve as the highlights for us personally that are rewarding. And thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.